we have invited JoAnn Tredennick to be with us today. And JoAnn, I thought we could start by maybe talking a little bit about your life, how it is that you became concerned with what's going on environmentally, and how did God lead you to focus on this, to care about it? Tell us a little bit about your story.
Can everybody hear me? Yeah, okay. And for the dads, thank you for spending your Father's Day thinking about stewarding our planet.
Yes.
That is appreciated. That's a two-part question, I think, Kate. So I'll start with how I got to be a very assertive conservationist.
Mm-hmm.
That really started early in my life. I was fortunate to grow up in a family where my parents were outdoors people. So they didn't talk about connect with nature, and they just did it. And, so I grew up around fisher folk and went hunting with my dad and,
Wow.
Was outside a lot. I also had parents that were politically involved.
Mm-hmm.
So if they saw something that was wrong, they felt, they took action to do something about it. And that included in the church and the secular realm.
Wow, good for them.
So I had some role models in that arena. Also, I came of age in the late 60s, early 70s, and that was a time in this country of real environmental awakening. I see some of you are in that demographic. So I cut school to go to the first Earth Day in Philadelphia.
Wow.
My parents never knew that. If they're listening now they know. But that was a time where young people, and I was young, were taking a lot of action, and certainly in this country, the damage we were doing to the planet was becoming really apparent. Rivers catching on fire. You couldn't walk away from that. So that affected my environmental consciousness, and really starting as a teenager, that grabbed me, and I've never turned away from that. In terms of how did that conservation ethic integrate with faith? Well, as a kind of a dumb young person, I thought it was in opposition. In fact, I wrote a paper in college in my ecology class. The teacher said we could write on any topic we wanted, so I wrote about why I thought the Christian religion was causing environmental disaster.
Wow.
Because of this notion that we talked about, and we still read it in Scripture, of having dominion over the earth. And of course, we don't, and we shouldn't.
Well, and if I may interject, the Hebrew word that we translated it as dominion is not a good translation.
Right.
So there we go. Yeah.
I was young. Very young, 20.
Yes.
And of course, as I've grown older and matured in faith and spiritual knowledge, including being a graduate of EFM.
Yay for EFM.
Yes, yay for EFM. Obviously, faith is at the core of what gives us hope for the future. And, it's very clearly, to me, a moral, a spiritual commitment to take care of our home. It's our home. And if we do believe that this earth, the universe, is God's creation, and we love God, how do you destroy God's home? Our home. Of course, the planet's going to be here. We need to be sure it's habitable for humans.
Right.
So
tell us about how you understand what's happening in the environment, and So there's a lot of debate about climate change. Is that just part of the natural course of the planet? Are we going through the end of a cooling period or something? How do you determine that this is human driven, that some of the catastrophic events of nature are human driven?
Well, there's lots of science that confirms that. And those scientific facts became known actually in the 1800s, so that this is not new information. In fact, I brought props. I would strongly recommend getting Katharine Hayhoe's book. Katharine Hayhoe is an atmospheric scientist. She's written a book called Saving Us, a climate scientist's case for hope and healing in a divided world. She's a Christian. She's an atmospheric scientist, and she's a fantastic communicator. She's also chief scientist with a nature conservancy.
Wow, sounds good.
Yes, but she communicates many things in this very readable book. It's readable for lay people, non-scientists.
Very good.
Does have a Christian foundation because she's an evangelical Christian.
And JoAnn, that's a great suggestion, because I think that often there are a couple of things that happen to people when they think about climate change. One is that the science they don't understand. And the other philosophy is that it's just, yeah, maybe the human race is hurting the planet, but I'm just so small that what I do doesn't make a difference. How do you answer that particular philosophy? Like, yeah, it may be that I'm polluting or whatever, but I'm just so small that in the end, it's not up to me.
Well, in one sense, that's true. You know, each of us, relative to the universe, is pretty darn small. But we can also have some major influences and impact by the decisions that we make in our life. And we can talk about some of those, but I'll talk about, first off, I think I'll start with a decision that's big. And a decision that's big is how we vote. You know, it's incumbent upon all of us as citizens of this planet, and I think as people of faith, if we feel that stewarding the earth is important, that we vote accordingly. And that means studying the candidates and understanding what their positions are on things like making good decisions to manage energy in a way that's going to ultimately reduce emissions, addressing resiliency, preparing. I mean, climate change is here. It's here. So, you know, making decisions about how can we adapt and mitigate in a way that's good. And I brought some props.
Oftentimes you're talking about the allocation of resources, aren't you? So a politician's priorities as to how they will spend often is a good indication of whether the environment is in a priority that so that we can put those resources in the right place, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think also it's a creation of a culture. Mm-hmm. So here is an example. I picked this up. This is yesterday's New York Times. And the state of New Jersey has now incorporated climate change curricula in every subject except two, English and math, which I don't know why they didn't do math, because there's a lot of calculations about carbon that you could do in a math class. But they've incorporated a curriculum for grades 1 through 12 that addresses climate change. And this harkens back to your sermon this morning about going towards.
Yes.
You know, move towards things. So the headline here is Climate Lessons for 7-Year-Olds. Fix it don't fear it. So that's
Right. Fear can
starting to-
often paralyze us.
Yes.
I've often thought about that story about the little boy on the shore with all these starfish that are drying out, and he starts throwing them in, and someone says, well, why are you doing that? There's so many of them, you can't save them all. And he says, yeah, but I just saved that one.
Right.
We can start with whatever we have. Yeah,
Right.
but not be afraid, just start.
Right.
Yeah.
And taking action gives us hope.
Yes. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of taking action, tell us about what you do. How do you live a life that actually does what you believe in this way?
Well, I think that's a challenge for all of us in
Absolutely.
many realms.
Yeah.
But a place to focus is, the decisions that we make. Carbon emissions are the result of using energy. And a lot of our energy is still generated by fossil fuels, which are putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So being efficient with our energy use is a place to start. Some decisions around that can be big. My husband Jack and I decided 2 decades ago that we were going to move to a neighborhood, historic Springfield, that put us 3 blocks from our office so we could walk to work or bike to work. That uses less energy. That would be a big life decision. JEA sends us in the mail decisions about or ways to make smaller life decisions. Using LED bulbs, getting energy efficient appliances. And I think a good way for us to think about that individually is making little changes at a time.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to change your whole life in a week. Attack one thing at a time. Okay, if it's light bulbs, where can I install LEDs in my house? How can I do my laundry more efficiently? You fill your washer, don't wash partial loads. I mean, it's all, it's systematically, Kate, thinking through maybe one thing at a time of areas of your life, and how can I make that more energy efficient?
Yeah, you can really think about categories, can't you? I mean, you were talking about, for one thing, researching candidates to vote and making sure that the environment is a priority. Investing, right? Investing in your money in companies that you can research and read about in terms of their carbon footprint or...
Yes.
Yeah. But you talk about things like laundry. Talk about the personal things in your home. Like what do you do about laundry? First of all, you said you don't just do a little bit of laundry and do a full load with a little bit of clothes. That's a great example.
Yeah.
What else do you do?
Yeah, in fact, National Geographic just sent an article this week about how to make your laundry, doing your laundry more eco-friendly. I mean, with tips on that. Obviously, we try to be efficient in using a car. So you can bundle your errands together, rather, just be more thoughtful about that. Not just run out to do this and run out to do that. Okay, I have to do these 4 things in the next 2 days. How can I make an energy-wise circuit to accomplish those? It's just, in a way, putting energy efficiency at the forefront of your consciousness, which becomes more of a habit. Where you keep your thermostat, men and women often have issues with this. Speaking from experience, Jack. But, a couple degrees on your thermostat makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And coupling these things with Christian practices, like maybe take a Sabbath day from driving. Right?
Yes.
Maybe if we could rest from driving 1 day a week, which is tough, but maybe some weeks we could do that. Yeah. So, it's very hard, JoAnn. I know I feel sometimes like you're walking in the rain trying not to get wet, thinking about plastic, for example. We go to the grocery store and I look and I'm trying not to buy plastic, but it seems like once my eyes begin to be opened, that it's everywhere. So how do you not get so frustrated that you give up? How do you do that?
Well, sometimes it is very it's depressing sometimes, and but I think as Christians, we're people of hope. We hope in the Lord. That doesn't mean we hope that we do nothing and God's going to fix it, but it means fundamentally we're people of hope, and we believe that we have agency and efficacy to do something. Going to the grocery store is one of the most disgusting and frustrating plastic orgies that it's so hard mentally, and I think your devotions in the morning do a really good job of getting us off to the right start in the day. You ask us to be grateful for the earth, and I think that's important, before your feet hit the ground, put in the front of your consciousness gratitude for the earth and this earth, and everything in here comes from the earth, and this is a gift. So being grateful is a good place to start too, but it can be very discouraging sometimes. Yes.
I showed this to you, but I have this little pouch that I got from an Episcopal church conference, and it has a little bamboo fork and knife and spoon, and I keep it in my purse. And I've loved using it, but not only using it, but like when I'm in a restaurant or in the airport and they hand me the plastic, I say, I don't use plastic utensils. I have my bamboo set. And they go, oh. Some of them get mad, some of them think it's cool, but I feel like part of it is not just using them, but talking about it. So tell me about ways that you talk about it. What do you do to kind of bug people? Sometimes I think they're just asleep, people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, what you describe right there is a good way to start a conversation. And, we try to be mindful about no one-time use plastics and take our utensils, or sometimes we'll take our silverware from the house, if we know they have that. But that starts a conversation. I'm pretty introverted, actually, so for me, just bolting up and starting conversations isn't my strength.
I'm more obnoxious. I just got in a fight with a guy down the street who runs a little restaurant, great restaurant, but he hands out those to-go boxes that are made out of the styrofoam.
Oh, Lord.
So
yeah,
I told him,
worst.
please don't serve these, and he said, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I'm like, okay, well.
Yeah, and sometimes you just have to turn and walk away. We can't fix everything like the starfish, but we can fix some things. And yeah.
So what other little tips do you have for things that you do? Do you bring a straw with you? Do you not use straws? What other?
Not use straws. I think, thinking about daily life, it's if you do use plastic, reusing as much as you can. Plastic is derived from fossil fuels, so the less of it we use, the less that's coming out from the ground. So that's important. Thinking about purchasing things that last. We read about fast fashion in the paper, people getting clothes and, that are cheap, probably produced with slave labor, and, you wear it 5 times and throw it out. Well, how colossally wasteful is something like that?
Yeah.
Thinking about the purchases you make, is this going to last? Should I pay more? Of course you should, in my opinion, for something that's going to last versus something cheap that we throw out. And I think too, Kate, a way to get beyond ourselves in addressing the climate crisis and is to support organizations that are addressing the climate crisis and doing something about it through our Green Spirits group here.
Yeah.
We've brought speakers or had events with groups like the Citizens Climate Lobby, which is one way to get involved, or Groundwork Jacksonville, that's doing a lot of resiliency type work for our community. North Florida Land Trust, St. John's Riverkeeper. These are, rather than trying to take it on ourselves, collective action is powerful. We know that from the movements that have taken place across the world. Collective action is powerful. So joining collectively with others to the degree you can, it says a lot. And other people will see you do that. Just like pulling out your utensils. People see you do it.
Yep. Our bookstore can be a source of places that you can buy, well, for example, some bags, so you're not using plastic bags at the grocery store, keeping those in your car.
Yes.
Buying bars of soap rather than plastic containers full of liquid soap.
Yes, the shower is another place. You just reminded me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rather than using liquid soap that weighs a lot and comes in plastic containers, you can buy bars of soap that come wrapped in paper. Yeah. I mean, it's, little things. Or there are even shampoo bars now. Shampoo comes in, liquid shampoo comes in plastic containers, but you can use shampoo bars. So yeah, there are a lot of little ways, and those are really important, but the big ways are important too. And those two I'm going to emphasize are voting and collective action.
Yeah.
Extremely important. It's a huge global problem, and we don't have a lot of time left to avoid some very serious and traumatic changes on the earth.
How else can we help others wake up? Or do you think of yourself as being responsible for your individual life and for the way that you invest or vote, but to let the other person make up their own choice? Or do you feel responsible for trying to help other people wake up or get more educated on these matters?
Well, I can't feel responsible for the actions of others. That's something that I can't control and I can't feel responsible for. Do I have a responsibility to set a good example? Yes. Do I have a responsibility to talk about these things? Yes. That's why I'm here today. Do I have a responsibility to act, to try to raise consciousness and try to influence the choices that we make politically and structurally in our society? Yes, I feel I have a responsibility for that.
It's a good distinction. It's a good distinction. JoAnn, in a lot of ways, if we look at the scripture, one of the cruxes of theologically of our relationship with God is about consumption, even from Adam and Eve taking what wasn't offered. The idea of taking and not giving back is really, Jesus talks so much more about that than he does about prayer, But we love to think about praying and reading scripture, but our consumption is a very spiritual thing. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. And I think we've been getting at that in this conversation, thinking about our consumption of energy, our consumption of plastic. If the front of our consciousness is on what can I get next, what will my status be if I have this, if that's where our, what comes down really to a spiritual focus is, that's a pretty hollow life.
Yeah.
And it's really based in selfishness and self-centeredness. So being conscious about using resources wisely is where I think as Christians we should be.
And ironically, all of our advertisements tell us that if we take and take, we'll be happy. But really, the deeper happiness comes sometimes from refraining, doesn't it? Or
Yes.
giving back.
Yes.
So ironically, we're trying to make ourselves happy by utilizing all the plastic and eating all the foods and doing all the driving, but in reality, it's not working for us, is it?
No. And I think I agree with you, and obviously we can't get in somebody else's head.
Sure.
You know, do I think that everybody that we see in public using plastic utensils, I mean, we went to a birthday party yesterday, Jack and I did, with a group of wonderful people. Plastic everywhere, plastic plates, plastic forks. We don't bring our own stuff to events in people's homes. Maybe we need to start that, Jack, because it'll start a conversation.
You have to decide how obnoxious you want to
Yes,
be. Right.
yeah. But yeah, you know, it's
It's about waking up.
yeah.
Because
I think they just.
how
I think
hard
people
is
just
it?
aren't. Do I think these people are saying, "Ugh, let's waste resources and send all this stuff to the landfill"? No, that's not how they're thinking. It's just easy. It's cheap, and that's where our culture, and I think the petroleum industry has put us.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of subsidies for petroleum, so they can produce these products cheaply, and they're right in front of us at Target or Dollar Tree or wherever we go. It's easy. So I don't think people are intentionally necessarily, but I think, I know
But it's
you'll
in
say a
the-
lot of people are asleep.
Yes, it's in the power of the consumer, though. If we stop buying disposable plastic bottles, they will go away.
Right.
But we have to stop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And to
Yes.
the extent that any of us can simply say, hey, do we really need all these plastic bottles? But you're right, there is a level of advocacy, almost prophetic. You know, the Old Testament prophets, people were mad at them all the time. It seems like we need some prophets with regards to sustainability. We need people to say,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I'm not going to use the plastic bottle. You give it to me. I don't
Right.
drink out of that.
Well,
and
here's
it's
what
going to make you
do.
mad.
You go into a meeting with this,
Yep.
and they offer you the plastic bottle, and you say, no, thank you, I don't use them.
Yeah.
I won't use one-time plastics. You don't have to say another thing, but you have made a statement.
Yes, you have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then the next step would be, and you shouldn't either, but
That's
refrain
implied.
from that.
I've often thought maybe we should have love at the core protesters at the grocery store, embarrassing everybody who walks out with plastic bags, but I haven't gotten there yet.
No.
But
I think I remember discouraging you from that.
yeah. Are there questions from the group this morning before we close? Are there questions? Yes. Thank you, Nancy. Jack has a question, then I saw Linda over here.
Well, I should call you JoAnn, not Honey, I guess. I think you ought to talk a little bit about TNC since you're so involved in that and what TNC does, because it's a big deal.
What was the word?
Then he asked, Jack's, this is my husband, by the way, Jack Meeks, and he's asking me to talk about my work with the Nature Conservancy.
Nature Conservancy.
The Nature Conservancy. TNC is the acronym for the Nature Conservancy. And I mentioned early on, Catherine Hayhoe, the author of this book, is now the chief scientist for the Nature Conservancy, which I thought was a brilliant hire. But I've been a member of the Nature Conservancy for close to 4 decades now, and over time, as I've been able to become more involved as a volunteer, a donor, and now I'm on the Florida Board of Trustees and have been for a number of years for the Nature Conservancy. And that's my way of using collective action to have global influence, because the Nature Conservancy is a global organization, and there is absolutely no way I could ever have global influence otherwise. So Jack's
Good.
asking me to talk about that.
That is a great organization, yes.
Yes.
Basically, they are about preserving land. Wouldn't you say that is their, one of their
yes,
primary goals?
yes.
Is to just make land.
Well, it's beyond. It's beyond now. You were right. At first, the Conservancy functioned as more like a land trust, but it's now preserving the land and water on which all life depends, which includes the atmosphere.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Good.
the big climate initiatives with the Nature Conservancy.
Well, thank you for serving on
yeah.
that board.
Yeah,
I'm glad
thank
to know
you.
you do. Yes, we have Linda and then Carol.
JoAnn, do you know of any advocacy groups that are lobbying to get rid of consumer single-use plastics? I mean, to me, my granddaughter and I were talking about this 3 years ago, and she said, why does Publix have bags that are plastic? She's going to be 14, and I said, well, you know, it would be pretty simple for Publix to say, no, I'm not doing it anymore. I mean, Aldi's does it. You don't get plastic bags at Aldi's. And Publix is a huge, I mean, that just starting to talk about it with people at the corporate level. And then at a political level, why not have advocacy against producing any plastic that's not utilized for, you know, like medical uses or something like that there's a dire need. But the consumer plastics are just out of control. I mean, there's piles and piles of plastic floating around in our ocean and seeping into our water. It's very dangerous. I think it's probably one of the most dangerous things we have in our climate. But it doesn't seem like that there's any advocacy for it on a collective basis to outlaw it. And it's not a hard thing to do. They outlaw things all the time.
My answer to your question would be, I am aware that there are, on a national level or in other areas, advocacy organizations addressing plastic pollution. Is there a local one here in Jacksonville? I am not aware of that.
We need to make sure
yeah,
you mic
for
for the
what
people that
she's-
are virtual.
Yeah, I'm gonna repeat
Please.
what
Okay.
Linda was saying is, you know, what are they doing? What's happening on the national level? And my answer is, I don't know exactly what they're doing. I know there's a lot of concern about one-time use plastics, and you know, I can read in the media about groups addressing this. I mean, I'd love to see our neighborhood retailers take on one-time plastics and have the retailers on Main Street commit to not use them. You know, right now, I don't have time to start that campaign, but maybe you do.
One of the things, I did talk with a local merchant here who basically said, these plastics that I'm putting people's food in plastics in this was a yogurt place in San Marco. They said they're using them because they're cheaper. They can't afford the containers that are paper. They're still more expensive now. Can't afford, you know, but that's what the merchant is saying. Make it cheaper for me and I'll do it, basically, is what his reasoning was. Carol.
Well, first of all, JoAnn, I want to say that even if you're an introvert, your role modeling, I think, is so important, and especially for young people to see what we're doing. I have a granddaughter that lives with me, and we have conversations around that, and I always think that's a good thing. The other thing that occurred to me this week when we were having all this rain, and I remembered to turn off my irrigation system, because sometimes it's just a simple thing of kind of forgetting that. And then she and I talk about recycling. She's a great shopper at consignment shops and that kind of thing, and then recycling it back so that other people can use that, and and not feeling like I can't, because there are great things in consignment shops. So that made me think of that. And then just recycling, having a basket that I put where I can see it, so that then I remember to put the glass in there and the things, the paper and things that can go, and trying to be mindful of that. So, but I loved your idea too of intention, creating the intention every day. Often with Kate's morning devotions, I think of that, creating the intention that throughout the day I'll remember that I'll do that. So thank you so much for
Carol.
putting this on.
Thank you. We have a comment over here, yeah.
Just a little suggestion. A lot around the area, and many time I get into where churches are giving food to the homeless. We're the biggest offender as churches. There's so much plastic. That plastic ends up in the river. Most of these homeless people, some of them have mental challenges. They don't really understand. They get a nice little bag of all sort of plastic things, and most of them just throw them on the street.
Yeah.
How can we, as a Christian organization, influence the problems that we're causing in
That's
the
a
right
great
positive
question.
things?
Tell them what you helped us do here to start off with, JoAnn.
Yes, I'm going to answer that on two levels then. So I'll do that first. So a number of years ago during Lent, we were praying for wise use of resources, and then we're going over to the Tolliver Hall and using all kind of one-time use plastics. And I said to Dean Kate, this is totally hypocritical.
I know, she was
You know,
absolutely right.
How can we be on our knees asking for wisdom in this area, and then we just do the opposite? So now we have a policy about no one-time use plastics are used on this campus. So yeah, so that's a very
Small.
local. I think Jacksonville. So now I'm going to state my personal opinion. This is not the opinion of the church. Make that very clear. Jacksonville is so far behind on solid waste management. I mean, we really are. There are a lot of things other cities are doing. We don't have to invent the wheel to reduce the amount of solid waste we produce substantially, through any number of mechanisms, and I'm not going to list them here, but you might remember when our recycling wasn't getting picked up. Well, the real reason it wasn't getting picked up was because the city was not paying the vendor enough to make a profit to run their trucks to pick up our recycling. That was the core of the problem. But let's get at the root. Why are we creating so much trash to begin with? Should we put some taxes on packaging? Should we pay people to bring their plastic in to get recycled? Should people bring in their cans because they get paid for it? It would be a money-losing venture on the face of it, because plastic as a recyclable material is not as profitable as aluminum. It may get, again, if the incentives and the taxation gets right, then there'll be different motivations for behavior. But I think as a city, and maybe this is a collective action for people of faith, addressing how we manage solid waste in this city. It's inefficient, it's wasteful. We live in the urban core, just a few blocks north of here. We could pick up trash hourly, and most of it now is plastic. Most of it. That's depressing too.
It is, yeah. But to your point, JoAnn was part of starting a group here called Green Spirits, Would you tell them a little bit about Green Spirits? This is the beginning of what I hope would be a movement, and we deliberately called it something that anyone could join. So it's church people, but there are also people now who come who are not churched.
Yes.
And we're hoping that maybe amongst all the churches and even beyond, we could start gathering momentum with this group.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, as you know, Green Spirits was actually a concept I stole from another church.
Great. That's how we do it.
we attend, and I asked permission to even use their name, Green Spirits, and the priest said, "Oh yes, you can use that name." So that's how we have Green Spirits, but it is catching. You know, Carol, I think you brought a friend to one of our Green Spirits events, and she wants to do something at her Presbyterian church similarly. And I still have on my inbox an email from another Episcopal church that wants to start a Green Spirits group. So I think it is catching,
Yep.
which is good. But our Green Spirits group is really our purpose of it is, of course, to raise the consciousness of people, raise awareness about how we should be stewarding our environment, but also very intentionally, as I said before, trying to introduce people to groups in this city that are already doing good work, like St. John's Riverkeeper or Citizens Climate Lobby, Groundwork Jacksonville, so that, rather than feeling like, oh my goodness, I don't have the time, or I don't have the money, or I don't have whatever, you can collectively join with others to do something.
So you all have been going on some hikes. You had some wonderful presentations about heat mapping, and so there's a variety of offerings. I hope you guys will watch out for that, and we'll keep inviting people.
Yes, and you can join Green Spirits. There's no fee, but if you go to our website, jaxcathedral.org, you can find Green Spirits and become a member, and you'll be on our mailing list and know about whatever activities are coming up. So,
Well, thank you. Thank you for doing what you're doing, for being a beacon of hope for us, and I hope that this journey is going to go a long way with us, too, working on this together.
well, Kate, I'm going to thank you because you've really been a gutsy leader in many ways of our cathedral, but I think willing to step out and do things like this, it takes courage. And I really appreciate your support of these efforts and your leadership. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks
And
for
thank
being
you all
with
for
us.
attending today.
Yes,
thank
thanks
you
for
for
coming
spending
today.
Father's Day
Yes,
here.
happy Father's
and thank
Day.
you to Jack for supporting my decades of work doing this.
Yes, thank you, Jack, for the good husband.